Okay, so comparing the Kung Fu films of the 70s with the new wave martial arts films of the 90s, the idea of the digital turn being a paradigm shift seems to be appropriate. Theorists of martial arts films usually say that after the 90s, virtuality replaced reality, wire-fu became cyber-fu, technology erased aura, the bodies disappeared under the onslaught of the digital. This concept of radical turn also supposes the loss of intermediality regarding that analog Kung Fu film borrowed the actor's aura from theater. In this paper, I don't want to argue with the concept of corporeal authenticity versus simulacrum cinema, accepting both as models of understanding, ideological systems, medium narratives. I just want to argue the assumption that Bruce Lee's films implied the metaphysical idea of pure presence. I suggest that in the light of his films, the shift between the old and the new technological era, or more precisely the discourses of technological eras, looks more like a shift from a deconstructive reading model to a postmodern one. Regarding the theatrical aspect, this would mean that instead of recalling the idea of avant-garde theater and performance, Lee's films rather evoke deconstructive performativity, which unfolds through the failure of the authentic performance. In the focus of the discourse of corporeal authenticity, there is first and foremost the actor's pure presence. We can regard this as a borrowing from theater in the footsteps of Walter Benjamin, who confronts the theater actor's aura, his here and now, with the ontological emptiness of the filmic figure. Theorists like Leon Hunt invest the actor of analog film such an aura as Benjamin identifies with theater actor. Hunt's main point is that the actor in a Kung Fu movie is really doing the action. We have to admire his physical ability, his skilled body. Like the other body genre porn movie, Kung Fu film also expresses, in Linda Williams' words, the desire to see and know more of the human body. Hunt says that for many old school friends, 1970s Kung Fu is the real thing because of the comparative lack of technological intervention. The techniques employed by the Hong Kong cinema of the 70s allowed the truly talented artist to shine on screen without artifice. Long extended takes in the fight scenes meant that the camera acted as a reporter, recording reality, not altering it. There's also an interesting parallel between the ideology of auratic acting and fighting. The concept of focus, concentration, staying in the moment guides Tyler Durden to organize his fight club. Fighting means to feel more alive. The thought that a performing body is a body which is present, so it's also from Leon Hunt, is both applied to the analog film and to the fight itself. Brad Pitt's acting presence is famous for recalling directly Bruce Lee's gestures. Pitt cites Lee's trademark gestures, thumbing the nose, the cocky bring-it-on-hand gesture to opponents, even the curled lip, a smoldering stare or mocking smirk. Pitt is obviously not a martial artist, but his non-professional movements still look as authentic as Lee's perfect kicks. This parallel between authentic clumsiness and authentic professionalism leads Paul Bowman in his Bruce Lee book to analyze the street fight between Mark Darcy and Daniel Cleaver in Bridget Jones' Diary. Despite the actor's mistakes, misses, and clumsiness, the fight still evokes excitement in the restaurant and somebody rushes in and cries, "Fight, it's a real fight." The source of excitement is the authenticity of the performance in all cases. But even those who acknowledge that technology cannot help but alter reality admit that the idea of transparency does not always deny special effect. Bruce Lee was famous for his extraordinary speed, so technology had to help the eye to perceive his movements. Donnie Yen called this a collaboration between technology and true ability. Maybe the speed is fake, the precision of the movement is not, and the camera remains fixed to prove it. Leon Hunt says, the frenzy of the visible is present in the spectacle of Bruce Lee's speed. Like Edward Muybridge's photographs of a horse in motion, the feet are visibly off the ground. We can find the same slow motion technique in Matrix 2, but with a very different aesthetic message. Because these scenes take place in virtual realities, programmed worlds, we are not asked to accept the scenery as real. In fact, the training scene is exactly about teaching Neo how to alter reality. The performing body doesn't want to hide its artificial aspect, since the whole film's postmodern voice is telling us that the world we experienced as real is fake, constructed, and that's why and how it can be manipulated endlessly. So Hunt says reality is not altered in Bruce Lee's films. Not even the kick at the camera, as an aggressive version of looking at the camera, staggers the realistic effect. Hunt admits that there's a certain aesthetics of ambivalence in gestures like this, but instead of saying that the emphasized shooting presence risks the fictional coherence of the film, he says it blurs it blurs the real and the virtual. Attraction and narration goes hand in hand in body genre in the same way as it did in early cinema. So the function of Bruce Lee's kick is not to point on the limits of cinematic representation, but to show up its capability of pure presence. But this gesture of disruption, by the fighter's rage against the machine, the film turns to an avant-garde performance. But is this really the case? We cannot leave out of sight that the camera is never really ruined in the end. Doesn't the auratic actor attack the apparatus in the manner of the desperate iconoclasts who try to hide the lack of God by ruining its replicas? The failure of crushing the camera may also tell us about the unnatural loneliness of the filmic figure, how Bazin called him, his ultimate impossibility to reach total presence. There are some signs in Lee's films which leads us to this interpretation, which will put the actor's effort to reach pure presence by performing a fight in an ironic light. If we regard the artwork as textual models, the idea that the fighting performance guarantees pure presence makes the martial art elements look like allegories of the performative dimension of rhetorics. The knockout of the opponent is equal to the knockout of representation. So any time when the violent encounter is delayed, suspended, or disrupted in a martial arts film, we can sense the questioning of the idea that performativity can be extracted from linguistic function and shown up purely without the contamination of representation. Though it is explained on the narrative level why the action is delayed, because the film has to balance between action and narration to build up its fictional shell, the delay of action sometimes seems to exceed the compulsory element of suspense and seems to be causeless, we could say arbitrary. First, there is the theme of education, as Paul Bowman puts it, Lee's lessons about martial arts. In The Way of the Dragon, when we first see Tang Lung fighting, he is commenting his own movements to his ad hoc audience by naming the techniques just as if they were in the gym. There is also a certain training atmosphere around the Coliseum scene when Tang Lung and his opponent, played by Chuck Norris, are making warm-ups before the final life and death struggle. Why is this preparation shown to us on the top of the event? Isn't the main point of cinematic realism that it can make us believe that all those fighting situations we exercised in endless simulations are really happening in a real ad hoc situation when there's no time for preparation? In Stephen Theo's explanation, this is because Lee wants to show us that his kung fu can be taught, that the skill is achievable, a result of fitness and rigorous training. But strictly regarding the aesthetic effect of the film, we could say that the price of this referential message is the suspension of action and attraction. The indications to the training situations weakens the performative power of the events, just as it happens in the gym, where we always hold over real fight. The same thing happens with the fictional element of the ethical codex about avoiding fight. Critics of The Big Boss say that Chang waits too long to react in the first part of the film. For example, Bernard-Marie Cortez, French playwright who was a great fan of Lee, said, "One of the most intensive pains I have ever felt was when I first saw Bruce Lee refusing to fight with the villains who attacked him. Because of a stupid pendant, he refuses to defend himself during the first part of the movie. He lets them humiliate him without doing anything, though he was the best. Of course, we have revenge at the end of the movie. He beats everyone to pulp, but the joy we feel in the end doesn't help us forget the former pain. Every time I watch The Big Boss, I leave the cinema exhausted from anger and shock because of the stupid pendant and dumb wolves." End of quote. The encounter also fails on the cultural level. The foreign warrior of Bruce Lee's character always arrives from an outer place. Before defeating everyone, we get to know him as lacking the qualities of fitting in. He cannot speak the community's language on several cultural levels. He doesn't know what to and how to order in a restaurant, how to behave with a prostitute, or use the toilet. Though this solitude and alienation is uncomfortable, the hero doesn't want to be part of this hostile community. Tang Lung criticizes the Roman luxury of the fountains. Chen Zhen is homesick during the whole film. Their separation never dissolves. The foreigner remains as a thorn in community's body, subverting the system from the inside. He's more like a Deleuzian minor character than a Cartesian subject. Interestingly, one of Deleuze's examples for minority is the warrior, which gives us a different image of the fighter from the hero of coherent identity. In connection with the minor adaptations of Shakespeare's dramas, Deleuze says, "In operating the subtraction of the characters of state power, director Carmelo Bene will give free rein to the constitution of the man of war on the state, with his prostheses, his deformities, his outgrowths, his defects, his variations. The man of war has always been considered in mythology as of another origin from that of the statesman or the king. Deformed and twisted, he always comes from somewhere else." The psychoanalyst explanation of the desire to make a connection with someone is that we want to create identity in the mirror of the other. If the encounter fails, the identity, the signified, the center of a meaningful word cannot emerge. This encounter fails in these films on the personal and on the cultural level too, when the hero holds over the fight and avoids assimilation. So, beside the concept of corporeal authenticity and postmodern simulacrum, there's a third way of reading martial arts films. Challenging presence on the theatrical stage of the analog film, Bruce Lee evokes the concept of corporeal authenticity, but by delaying the encounter on the personal and on the cultural level, his performance becomes disrupted, leaving a Derridian message of penetrated presence. The theoretical implication of this self-denial differs from the ideological message of cyborg heroes who represent the infinite network of simulacrum. The failure of reaching pure presence doesn't equal with the strict statement of its essential lack. Because of a positive possibility, term of Derrida, performativity disrupts representation, making it permanently unsteady. The theatrical stage of analog film intimates this possibility by evoking the desire for corporeal authenticity. So thank you for your attention, and maybe who became interested in martial arts studies and can speak Hungarian, I would recommend our very fresh issue of martial arts studies with a lot of translations and also on papers from Hungarian authors. Thank you very much.